Okay, so here's some more examples of solving quadratic equations, and this is something that actually, if we wanted to graph this, we could tell that it's a parabola, and the vertex is at 3, -6. If we want to find the zeros, this is how we would do it. We would solve this quadratic equation. So what we would do first is we would try to isolate the x minus 3, like we did in our last video. So I'd add 6 to both sides. And I get x minus 3 squared equals 6. So x minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 6. And then if I add 3, I get x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 6. All right. And if we go back and look at our approximations from the last problem, number 4 here, what do you think the square root of 6 would be? Well, this is about 2.6. This is the middle point. So we would say the square root of 6 is about 2.4. And if you look at that up on your calculator, that's a pretty good approximation. So I could say x equals 3 plus the square root of 6, which is 3 plus 2.4. And that should be approximately, I guess. And that's going to be equal to 5.4. Or I could say x equals 3 minus the square root of 6, which is approximately 3 minus 2.4, and that equals 0.6. So those would actually be the values, and you can find those by using that interpolating process. So that's a little bit of that, so we won't do any more like that, but you can always interpolate. Okay. All right, let's take a look at number 6. Two times x plus 4 squared minus 7 equals 3. And we'd probably want to isolate the squared term. So what we do is add 7 to both sides first. And we get 2 times x plus 4 squared equals 10. And I divide by 2 to isolate that x plus 4 squared factor. And I've got x plus 4 squared equals 5. And now I'm ready to apply my rule. If x plus 4 squared equals 5, x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 5. And then I could just kind of work over here and say that implies that x equals, well, let me not do that like that. I'll do it over here like we've been doing. I'll subtract 4 from both sides. And we have that x plus 4 equals -4 plus or minus the square root of 5. And you have -4 plus the square root of 5 or -4 minus the square root of 5. And you can work that out with decimals and figure out what it is. Okay? So that's a pretty hefty one when they're in this form. Okay? Let's take a look at another one, number 7. And now we've got a trinomial. These are not really in our regular trinomial form, but when we have trinomial, something like this, and this is actually something in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This is in trinomial form where we've got a is not 0 and b is not 0. C may or may not be 0, but we have it in this form. Then we have basically 3 techniques that we use to solve these equations. The first one is to factor. The second one is complete the square. And the third way is the quadratic formula. Now they get more difficult as we go down the line, so if we can factor, that's what we're going to do first. Pardon me. If we can't factor, we try to complete the square. If we can't complete the square, we don't want to do that, then this is the last resort. This always works, but it's a little more complicated, and you'll see that in just a moment. So let's take a look at this first one. And the first thing I'll try to factor, and it looks like a simple trinomial. So I know the only way I'm going to get x squared is by x times x. This tells me these signs are different, and this tells me the sign of the larger, so I'm going to say it's going to be positive, negative. And I need two numbers that multiply to give 8 and differ by 2, and that would be just 4 and 2. I can always check it by using the FOIL process, first term times first term. A positive 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8, and then a positive 4x minus 2x is going to be positive 2x. Now we know that if, remember this fact, if two numbers multiply to give 0, if a times b equals 0, that means that either a equals 0 or b equals 0. That's the only way you can get 0. If you take two factors and their product is 0, one or the other must be 0. So we could set each of these equal to 0, say x plus 4 equals 0, or x minus 2 equals 0. And then if I just subtract 4 from both sides, or add 2, I get x equals negative 4, or x equals positive 2. So there's your solutions. So that's factoring. Okay? And we'll do 2 more in the next video.